Good afternoon to you. Mark South of HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Wednesday, the 14th of September, 2022. The main focus of today's update here, the hurricane outlook and discussion. We're going to discuss Tropical Depression 7. That's the main thrust of everything. I know there's a lot of stuff going on globally. Typhoons in the Pacific, potential development in the Eastern Pacific. The typhoons, of course, in the Westpac. But the main focus today will be on TD number 7. And the potential impacts for our friends in the islands first, the Northeast Islands of the Caribbean there, and then we'll take a little bit of a peek beyond the 5-day time frame to kind of see what might happen a little bit further down the road. All right. Well, first, here's an interesting tweet to kind of start things off. All right, this is from Eric Webb. The mid-troposphere temperature gradient. The gradient is the difference in something over distance, okay? And in this case, it's temperature. Temperature change over distance between the tropics and the mid-latitude and the northern hemisphere was at the weakest on record this summer. I wonder why. I'll show you. A weaker gradient leads to stretched, weak Hadley cell, favoring sluggish tropical cyclone activity globally, as the tropical cyclones are unable to transport heat out of the tropics as efficiently. Basically, breaking that down, it's been basically out of balance, or I guess you could say in balance, but the whole thing seems out of balance. I know it's kind of a paradox there, but there's so much heat that the tropical cyclones weren't necessary, so to speak. Stuff was distorted. Very simplistic way to put it. But, as I talked about with Danielle and Earl, wait until I show you this. I keep gloating because I just thought this was going to matter, and I'm thinking it might matter more and more. We shall see. There it is, September the 10th. We had Earl still milling around up here. Danielle was already long gone, some of the remnants over there along the Iberian Peninsula. That was the 10th. This is yesterday. And I know you're like, wait a minute, what am I looking at? Let me just show you one more time. This is what it looked like on the 10th. That's that ridiculous area of 5+ Celsius, anomalously warm water. That is yesterday. That is a dramatic turnaround over a fairly large area. Look at it again. Now you get to see, oh, okay. That is a pretty big reduction in the anomalies there, and some of them have even turned negative. So that might be enough to start to change what's happening, at least here in the northern hemisphere, western hemisphere region, if that makes any sense. The North Atlantic Basin part of the western hemisphere. We'll see. Maybe I'm completely wrong and it's not going to have any impact. It might not even be connected. But man, when you take that heat and get rid of it, and you still have the heat down here in the deep tropics relative to average, water temperatures are warmer than average through here. These have not cooled off. They've stayed. This has cooled off. And if this is a cause, and you're changing the cause, logic would dictate that you start to jumpstart the system once again. We're going to find out. And that brings me to this. Hey, coincidentally, now we have Tropical Depression 7. Where? In the main development region, where not much has been happening over the last several weeks because the instability issues related to perhaps how warm it has been in the high latitudes. Maybe we are on to something here. All the different people that are watching this, okay? And I'm not the only one that was thinking, hey, if we get these high latitude tropical cyclones mixing things up, again, I'm not the one that's like the genius of the world or anything. I'm just saying it made logical sense. And we just might be seeing some of the results of that change, but I don't know. There's no way for me to really quantify it and actually show causation, but at least it makes sense. All right, so enough of that. Let's see what we have going on. Stick to the facts here, and they are, well, we have a depression. That is true. Moving west at 14,009 millibars as of the 11 a.m. advisory. The main thing to take away from this right now and in the coming days, our friends over here in the islands are going to see impacts. Squally weather, heavy rain, lightning, thunder. Of course, if you have lightning, you will have thunder. Locally rough seas, the potential, because it looks like it might slow down in this vicinity. We're going to get to that. there could be some really nasty rainfall through here. Puerto Rico, maybe parts of Hispaniola, Dominican Republic first. That's the eastern side. But certainly not to forget our friends over here in the smaller islands of the Northeast Caribbean, especially if, and this is a big if, this system continues to overachieve and it begins intensifying maybe rapidly. We don't know that. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if it intensifies coming through and doesn't fall apart, then the wind impacts are going to be much higher. So we're going to focus on those wind and other impacts over the coming days and make sure that that is honed in on, with rain not being ignored. I don't want people to be like, it's just a depression, it's just a weak storm, you're making too much of it, blah, 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 blah. Go watch something else. Seriously. Because rain kills people. And too much of it kills people. It does. And the people of Puerto Rico know that very well from Maria. Of course, Maria was still almost a Cat 5 when it hit. But believe me, the rainfall by itself is problematic. So we need to keep that in mind. All right? Another interesting tweet here. Michael Lowry, revealing microwave picture. It's a particular spectrum that's used. It's not a picture from someone's microwave. Haha. But it's a microwave imagery. Earlier today, coincident with the ongoing convective blow-up, I'll show you that in a minute, showing a small but intense area of convection right here getting picked up on near the center of the large circulation. It's fighting tough against some conditions that are trying to thwart this thing from developing, but it is holding on and it's trying to develop. All right, so here are the different satellite animations. First, real quick, in the Eastern Pacific, yes, we will be watching this. A couple of areas of energy here. Not real sure exactly which one is going to win out or what's going to happen, but we'll see. Something should develop and be in this general region over the next 5 to 7 days or so. Some limited convection in the Gulf of Mexico, nothing coming together there. A little bit of shower and thunderstorm activity trying to concentrate east of Florida. And then there is our depression out here, well to the east of the northern part of the Lesser Antilles. If we zoom in, that is the nice blow-up of thunderstorms or deep convection right there that Michael Lowry was talking about. Clearly, you can see the rotation with our tropical depression here. Decent outflow in the upper levels. There is some dry air. How do we know that? Well, these little streamers that come out up here where the clouds just kind of arc out like that, and they are called arc clouds. That's from outflow or air that is spreading out at the surface. That's not a good sign for intensification, but it's not doing it everywhere. There's still very deep convection over here. There are just some negative conditions still around. This is not your Irma or your Maria situation where this is going to rapidly develop right in front of our eyes, but it is certainly making progress, and it has been classified as a depression based on satellite imagery. Tomorrow, we will get, if everything goes well, recon data. They will fly out there from St. Croix, I believe, and we'll have in situ data on this system. And it's doing so despite the MJO. One of our patrons over on Discord, Karen, was asking about the MJO. There it is. It is in the null phase currently, and it's forecast to be who knows where over the next couple of weeks or so. JMA, that was the Euro that I just showed you. This is the JMA from the Japanese Meteorological Agency. Also currently indicating that it's in the null phase, meaning there's not much MJO activity really anywhere. Some subtle hints that it might get out into the phases that favor the Atlantic more, but we do have this happening, our TD there, the depression, during a period of time when the MJO is not in the Atlantic, so it's not got that extra boost. And we are seeing, as I said, multiple typhoons in the Western Pacific right now. One made landfall today near Shanghai. Pretty dramatic video coming out of there on social media. And then those other two that are out there. And I'll talk about those more tomorrow. Not that we're ignoring them or that they are not important, but we're going to focus on the Atlantic, like I said, today. All right? So a couple of things to note just to show you. The Atlantic, Western Atlantic off the Mid-Atlantic states and the Northeast generally still very, very warm. I would say these are the peak temperatures. There's 30 Celsius, for goodness sakes, coming up In the Gulf Stream, there's 29 Celsius there, not too far off the Carolina coast. And then, of course, for New England, etc., up here, water temperatures do cool off. The gradient, there's that word again, the difference in temperature here over distance is not real steep. It just kind of gradually drops off. There's not a quick drop off. So, this is about 26 Celsius, and then looks like that's 24, 22. So, lower 70s Fahrenheit as you get near Long Island. Just pointing this out as we are in mid-September. Gulf of Mexico, we've kind of trimmed off the ridiculously warm. There's a lot of 30 degrees Celsius through here. The sun angle is not as high, so we're gradually trimming off the top, so to speak, of those crazy, crazy warm temperatures that we saw. But make no mistake, even the blues on here and the purples, I mean, that's still 27.4. We're talking almost 82 degrees Fahrenheit, even on the left side of the scale down here. So these very coolish looking water temperatures, and these are actual temperatures here, that don't let the scale fool you. That's why you got to read the legend. What's the scale show? Well, that's still 27 to 28, which is 81, 82 Fahrenheit. Plenty warm for hurricanes, if there were to be one, in this vicinity. One other thing to show you before we get into the modeling, that's the vorticity signature of our depression. Hey, we need to watch that as well. No mention of it on the tropical weather outlook that I saw. I don't remember it being there, but maybe they did. Some of the models do indicate that this tries to follow along with what would eventually presumably be Fiona here, and if this develops, it would be Gaston. And yes, that's still the leftover energy of Earl. And look what it did all up through here. I showed you that a minute ago. It's still chewing away at those sea surface temperatures, and that's important. That could be an important player. It's going to be really interesting to see as we go forward if we have a major uptick in activity and if we can pin it on what happened with Danielle, but especially Earl. And then lastly, our competing areas of energy here. Too much going on. We'll see which one of those wins out and what happens with those over time. All right, GFS from the 12Z run today. There it is right there, 12Z, 850 millibars in the atmosphere. That is the same level that this is. This is an analysis, like a snapshot of what's going on out there when this was taken at 1500 UTC. This is the GFS analysis, the input, if you will, the starting point, and it did a pretty good job. It might have underdone it a little bit, meaning that in reality the vorticity and the energy is a little stronger. There's that other system over there. So let's see what the GFS does with this down near the surface, 5,000 feet up, over the next 7 days. I'll put this into motion. There's 24 hours there, holding its own, might be a tropical storm at that point. Certainly isn't weakening, which the GFS, this is certainly the strongest we have seen it. It's been playing catch-up. It seems like, generally speaking, most of the models have been playing catch-up, except for the Euro. In this case, it finally got one right, and the Navy NavGem model, believe it or not. Anyway, GFS, there's 24 hours. There's 48. Definitely, in my mind, I see that and I think, oh, that's probably a tropical storm. That's a decent signature. And just to make sure you know what you're looking at, we're talking about that right there. And then we move this on out. Watch how it moves here to 72 hours. Starts to lose its definition just a little bit. And then by 96 hours, now this is where it's really, really important. And so I'm going to change the domain to the Western Atlantic here so we can focus in on it a little bit. This represents energy in the atmosphere, or at least that's the way I look at it. Vorticity or spin. And the more of it, the darker those colors get, it implies a more intense system, a lot more speed and rotation going on. There's a whole bunch of meteorology there, some of it even beyond my educational expertise. Remember, my degree is in geography, studying meteorology, climatology, and hurricanes, but I'm not a full-on math, physics, differential equations, calculus meteorologist. That would make my head explode. So I know enough, based on what I do studying hurricanes and other weather impacts, to explain the basics of it. But the point is, that right there says to me, rainfall. Just looking at that, that's enough to say heavy rain. A big weather system moving through, in that it is going to create conditions that you need to be ready for down there in the Northeast Caribbean Sea. Don't take this lightly because it's not showing a big honking hurricane down there. That's not the right way to look at it. So it comes through very slowly there, almost right over Puerto Rico with some of that vorticity out to 5 days. And I'm going to say it again, this could be a big rainmaker through here. Mark my words, that could be very problematic. We need to watch that very closely, okay? Okay, good. We'll talk about it again tomorrow, too, because we'll get some better forecasts as well. Moving on ahead to day 6, it starts to intensify north of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic down there. And then finally by day 7, still getting its act together. And look, I know everybody that can go to Tropical Tidbits or Weather Nerds or the Pace sites or whatever can run this all the way out to 384 hours, but what good is that going to do? You know, yes, I know that it goes up into the northeast at the long range periods, but this is so far out in time. And just to contrast it a little bit, that's the GFS at 1 week out. Here's the Canadian at 1 week out. I mean, you see what the problem is. You can't go, that's just two different models, same day, a week apart, or a week out into time. Quite a big difference there, I think we can all agree to. And so even showing days 6 and 7 is, you know, at least in this situation, I'm putting context to it. Throwing them on social media or throwing them on as just a thumbnail and drawing all sorts of arrows towards it, that gets a lot of people to watch and click and share, but how educational really is it in the long run? At least in this situation, I'm trying to show you, again, what I would look at even without you good people on your side of the screen, okay? So this is my little explainer halfway through, or 2/3 of the way through the update monologue for you. Finally, though, really wrapping things up, the euro. What is this? Why are you showing those pinks and or purples and greens? I hadn't showed that before. I thought this was interesting, and as I understand it, the greens is kind of your air moving inward or towards, like convergence, and the purples are air moving away, as an easy way to understand it. And then the little red areas are your dilation axes, which is the plural of axis, you know, where the air is, the parcel is at its sort of stretching point. Again, it's kind of meteorological weeds that they were getting into, but this kind of shows us the organization. Very similar to when I show you this, the low-level vorticity. This shows you a little bit more of the mechanics of it. So that's what I'm going to show you here. This is every 24 hours. So here's the euro, and so it's 24. This will be tomorrow morning, Thursday morning. Friday morning moves into the islands a little bit further to the south from where the GFS has it. So let's switch it over to that Western Atlantic domain. And again, it looks like a big rainmaker through there. You know, maybe a depression, maybe a storm. Those are just labels. I'd look at this from how much rain am I going to get? How slow is it going to moving? Is this going to cause flooding, squalls? I've got a boating company, jet ski company, umbrella rentals, whatever. Cruise ships, you name it. There's a lot involved here. So just looking at the pressure and saying it's not a hurricane so I don't care, that is foolish. All right, going on out, 72 hours. Now this is important. There's 72, there's 96, and then there's 120. That doesn't move a whole heck of a lot, really, even from 48 to 72. That's pretty good there, but 72 to 120, very slow moving overall. So again, this area through here could get a lot of rain, and we got to watch that carefully because that could be hugely problematic. But as it goes on, there's day 5, day 6, day 7, and then there's that other little feature I was telling you about right there. It's trying to sneak in, might try to be doing something. And this shows, interestingly enough, look, that's your clockwise look to the outflow. At least that's the way I look at it. So very decent outflow, lots of low-level inflow down here. Pretty good setup overall at day 7 from the euro. And here's the biggest takeaway of all. Both the GFS and the euro have trended away from a stretched out, weak system overall. The GFS has showed that very consistently. It's playing catch up to where the euro has generally been all along, but there's been a run or two where the euro was like, yeah, it's not going to do much. A lot of shear down there. But all of a sudden, it looks like the pattern is going to flip, potentially, and in a week's time, we might be looking at something close to a strong tropical storm, maybe in the vicinity of the Bahamas. We'll just have to wait and see. So there you go. That's what I know, and now you know what I know, and you know what I would be looking at, like I said, if I was just doing this all by myself. But I'm not. I've got you all, and I do appreciate that, and we'll stay on top of this, and we'll see how this evolves. But again, our first concern is for our friends down there in the Northeast Caribbean. I've already been in touch with a couple of these folks that I know one way or the other personally through either social media, or I've met them in person. We're talking, and we're going to be on top of. We've actually got a couple of cams down there, one in St. Thomas and one over in St. John and one in Puerto Rico. And I'm even considering maybe, just maybe, heading down to Puerto Rico myself, possibly on Friday at the latest. We'll see how things wrap up, because the rain impacts could be significant, and covering the flash flooding doesn't have to be a big old windstorm and a low pressure, of 65 millibars to get me excited. It's about the impacts, not the the viral video of amazing wind and surge or whatever. It's not always about that. Anyway, let me get this online for you. Let's get it up and show you what I got here, all right? I'll be back tomorrow morning, though, of course, with the What's Up segment. And then we'll do this again tomorrow afternoon, probably be talking about Tropical Storm Fiona at that point in time. We shall see. As always, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. I am Mark Sudduth for Hurricane Track. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow morning.